now, save 50 to 70% off at Banana Republic factory stores and online. And 60% off absolutely everything at Gap factory stores. Save even more with 40% off clearance at Gap factory stores. And at Banana Republic factory, sweaters start at $19.99 and scarves start at $9.99. Hurry! Search our store locator for your nearest Gap factory and Banana Republic factory store, or shop us online.
Welcome to Nonprofit
Talk Radio.
Welcome to Nonprofit U, a forum where nonprofit stakeholders can share lessons learned and discuss the latest developments in the industry. My name is Valerie, Leonard, your host. I'm a consultant to nonprofits, and I specialize in community and organizational development. I work with nonprofit organizations to help them make a stronger impact to their clients and communities. You can find Nonprofit U on Facebook and Twitter, and I encourage you to comment early and often using the hashtags NonprofitU, Think Big, or the next 5 things. You can also leave comments on blogtalkradio.com/nonprofit_U. The chat room is open, and you can post comments and questions. In order to use the chat room, you must open a listener-only account. You'll find a link to open the account on the episode page, and you can also email me questions at consulting@valeriefleonard.com or send messages through Facebook and Twitter. You'll find a Nonprofit U fan page on Facebook, and the Twitter account is @NonprofitU. We'll be taking questions by phone and from our chat room at about the 20-minute mark, and the call-in number is area code 347-884-8121. Today's episode is Think Big, the next 5 things in nonprofit management. We'll talk about exercising democracy as a fundamental survival skill, innovation literacy, reframing mission, burying institutional silos and developing new alliances, and cultivating inclusive leadership. Again, we encourage you to call in with questions and to participate in live chats at the 20-minute mark. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Nonprofit professionals, educators, and community stakeholders are especially encouraged to call in and share your story. Our guest for today is Kate Pravera. She's the academic director and founder of the Certificate in Nonprofit Management program at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Dr. Pravera is an accomplished nonprofit executive, and she's also an educator and consultant with 30 years of experience building partnerships across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors and working across disciplines. In 2000, she established a Certificate in Nonprofit Management online program, the first online instructor-led professional development credential program for nonprofit practitioners in the U.S. Her extensive knowledge of the nonprofit sector and management of nonprofit organizations has shaped the CNM program for nearly 15 years, and I will say that I'm one of her first students. You can find the bio for Kate on my blog, Nonprofit U, under episode 13, Think Big. Go to valeriefleonard.com/nonprofitU and click onto the episodes page. So, Kate, I'm very honored to have you here today, and it's so surreal. I can't believe we met 15 years ago when I was in the program. Can you give us a brief overview of the Certificate in Nonprofit Management program?
Certainly, Valerie, and thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with you and with your listeners. We have come a long way in those 15 years. Back when you first enrolled in the program, we offered 6 courses, and everyone took the same 6, whether they needed those things or not. Today, we offer 15 courses, and students select 6 from that larger menu so that they put together a curriculum that really meets their needs. All of our classes are online and instructor-led, and students can learn more by going to cnm.scs.uic.edu or simply Google the Certificate in Nonprofit Management program at UIC, and we'll pop up.
Oh, great. So how did you develop the next 5 things you'll be sharing with us today?
Well, Valerie, I teach a class in our program called Understanding Nonprofits Today, and preparing and teaching that class has given me the opportunity to explore the literature broadly and deeply about nonprofit trends, what's going on in our landscape overall. I also have had the privilege of meeting and learning from thousands of nonprofit practitioners around the U.S. and beyond in our virtual classrooms. It's really those relationships and conversations that have shaped my outlook about where nonprofits are at today and what we need to do next.
Mm-hmm. So, Kate, how do nonprofits position themselves to ride the wave during these difficult times?
Okay, let's jump right into this. You used the phrase ride the wave, and I think that is a great starting point for our conversation. We're so focused on keeping our heads above the water as nonprofit leaders, and understandably so, that I wonder if we ever pause to ask, where are the waves coming from? What I mean by that is, are these waves the forces of Mother Nature, like a great tsunami washing over us, or are some of these waves engineered? If you think of a water park for a moment, where machines are installed to generate waves, helps us to understand, waves can be engineered. And I argue that the economic and political machines today are making waves, well, certainly for all of society, and for nonprofits in particular, when we talk about funding issues and so on, we just don't see them clearly enough.
Yeah, that's interesting. As you talked about riding the wave, I thought about, I guess, a guy in Hawaii on a surfboard, literally trying to, stay on top of that surfboard. And then I also thought about physics. For every action, there's an equal reaction. And when these waves are created, we as nonprofits, sometimes we stand there and we absorb the hit, rather than, making our own wave back.
Absolutely.
So when I think about that, and and what you just shared with us, how does that affect your thinking about the next 5 things?
Well, I think it affects it a great deal. If we think that at least some of the waves around us are manufactured, then the next 5 things on the nonprofit agenda will be very different than if we think they're totally out of our control. Will we simply endure? Will we engage with the wave makers? Or, hey, will we learn to make the waves ourselves? And it's the last of these that I want to talk about today, how nonprofits can be making waves, big waves, starting by thinking big.
Yes. So what's the first thing nonprofits can do to start thinking big?
Well, you've given it away here in our little list, but I'll repeat. Exercise democracy. Now, I want to ask your listeners, do your eyes glaze over when you hear this phrase, exercise democracy? Does it seem vague or tiresome? If so, I have a question for you. Who is engineering waves for nonprofits in Illinois? One of the biggest waves, perhaps the biggest wave that we are riding right now, relates to funding cuts for critical human services. We're talking about child care for working families, home health aides for seniors, assistance to low-income persons for heating bills and disability services, and much, much more. The thing is, all of these cuts have been made for purely political reasons, and as a result, many people are suffering.
Yeah, and when you speak of suffering, I live in a community, North Lawndale. So people who may not be from Chicago, North Lawndale is a very poor community on the west side of Chicago, clearly very dependent upon social services and government. And given our dependency on nonprofit sector, about 25% of our economy right now is tied up in Springfield, because a will of, I guess, two titans, having a battle of the wills as to whether or not they should fund, different social services programs. And we're suffering, I think, more than most communities. So a lot of people are scratching their heads right about now and asking, how did this happen? I know they're asking that in Lawndale, and I'm wondering if in your circle's case they're asking you the same thing.
Absolutely. The interesting thing, and we know this, and yet we don't know it on some level, the governor making these ruthless cuts was elected by the people of Illinois. Not all the people in Illinois, mind you. Only 19% of all individuals that are eligible to vote in Illinois actually voted for any candidate at all in the 2014 gubernatorial election. That's less than 1 in 5 people. Nationally, voter turnout was also quite low. In fact, the New York Times stated it was the lowest in 72 years. So Illinois is not alone. Add to that the fact that the governor won the election with 50.8% of the vote. So if more people voted, there's certainly a possibility there could have been a different outcome and different consequences. Now, I've been mentioning these numbers to some friends lately, and they say they had no idea that now that the cuts are taking place, a lot of people do have a better idea of what was at stake on Election Day. Unfortunately, the election's over.
Wow. And for many people, that's not the only thing that's over. A number of organizations have literally had to close their doors because the governor has unilaterally cut contracts midstream. Some of these contracts were worth millions of dollars. Others, he just opted not to fund it. And these are just two examples of a lot of the bloodshed that we've experienced during the election. And, there's an old saying, elections have consequences. And I know, too, that nonprofits are somewhat leery of talking about elections, given the nonprofit rules, by the IRS. So can you share with us ways that nonprofits can exercise democracy, but at the same time not jeopardize their standing with the IRS? And that might entail clarifying some of the rules.
I appreciate that question, Valerie. The IRS is concerned about lobbying and about nonprofits that promote specific candidates. When I talk about exercising democracy, I'm referring to something much more basic, and there are many, many ways to exercise democracy. We start with our own vote. We can work as organizations on promoting voter registration, and many nonprofits have been quite instrumental in registering voters. There's also fighting for voting rights, which is something no one thought we would have to do in 2015, but here we are. And something that's very much in the news today, speaking out and organizing against injustice. Pick your issue. There's so much injustice. And that's part of exercising democracy, is to stand up and say, wait a minute, we won't tolerate this. The Black Lives Matter campaign is a really great example of making waves. These are the kinds of fundamental survival skills nonprofit leaders need to use in the 2010s. What we've learned the hard way here in Illinois is this: turning our backs on the electoral process, perhaps because we say we aren't political, left a lot of money on the table for the 1%. And those are our own tax dollars. So that's a lot to think about.
Yes, it is. And then moving on to the next point, what follows from exercising democracy?
All right. My next point is innovation literacy. Voting is not a panacea for all of our social skills. I'll be the first to recognize that. our system, whether it's our economic system, political system, it's broken, and it's never going to be the same again. So while we're advocating for change, getting out the vote, we as nonprofit leaders must also innovate. Now, everyone's in favor of innovation in theory, but what is it? It's not just something new. Social innovation is essentially a novel solution to a social problem that's more effective, more efficient, sustainable, or more just than existing solutions that we have. I think innovation is just not optional. Given the rapidly changing world we live in, if nonprofits don't innovate, others will keep making the waves. Now, I emphasize innovation literacy because we need to do more than just wish that it would happen or will it and say, well, tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to innovate, right? We really need to study innovation. What does it look like? And how can we foster a culture of innovation in our organization? This is not easy, but I think it's really important.
Oh, great. So can you point us to some of the resources that you're aware of about innovation?
Yes, I'd like to recommend one book in particular. It's called The Future of Nonprofits by David Neff and Randall Moss, The Future of Nonprofits. And the basic premise of this book is that nonprofits must innovate or die. And they discuss how every aspect of our environment is changing. This is something we're all quite aware of. And they talk about how to create a culture of innovation in your organization. For people that are interested in in-depth cases, there is a book recently published called Cases in Innovative Nonprofits. And Valerie, I will ask if you can post that information on your blog so I don't have to go through the details now. The two books are The Future of Nonprofits and Cases in Innovative Nonprofits. We're just at the beginning here of need to be literate in this and develop strategies and tools, paradigms, frameworks. So these books may be a starting point for some.
Oh, awesome. So I will make a point of putting those links onto my website as well as other materials that you might want to share. I really appreciate this. So you've given us a lot to think about today, Kate, and given that nonprofit leaders are already so overworked, how can they find time to do all these things that you just shared?
Well, let's go back to my third point, if we may. We've covered the first two, exercising democracy and innovation literacy. Is it okay to talk a little bit about reframing mission?
Okay.
Okay. When I say reframing mission, I am not saying that a nonprofit should go and change the mission statement at all. Every nonprofit has a mission statement that explains why the organization exists, what it's trying to accomplish, and how it is accomplishing it. And mission statements, most of your listeners know, I'm sure, they're considered the heart, really, truly the soul of what a nonprofit is all about. What I'm suggesting is that we reframe the moral boundaries of our mission, because nonprofits are part of a moral ecosystem. Now, what the heck do I mean by that? Let's think of a forest that's filled with all kinds of trees: balsam fir, maple, chestnut oak, spruce, red pine, and on and on and on. So picture this forest with all these different trees. In the conventional view of nonprofit management, the way I observed and experienced it going all the way back to the 1980s, the conventional view is that every nonprofit organization is its own tree in the forest. Every tree is watered by its own staff, overseen by its own board of directors, has its own water supply, i.e. funding, and they're very self-contained. We in our organization tend to be, yet it doesn't really make any sense for every tree to be totally independent of the larger ecosystem. Does that make any sense, Valerie?
Yeah, it certainly does make a lot of sense, and I thank you for bringing me back. I guess for me, I look at it as a whole village. You know, it takes a village to make the community healthy, and I like your analogy of trees. So who's going to be that one guiding force that brings all of the trees together and make sure that there's inclusiveness and leadership and all that good stuff?
Yeah, let me push this metaphor a little bit more, if I may. There's an awful lot going on in the forest that's really important, and we see and hear about this in the news all the time, literally. We know on the West Coast there's drought, there's fire, there's pestilence, and increasingly in places like the Amazon, the disappearance of entire species. So there's a lot going on in the forest where all these individual trees are rooted. And also, here's another example. What happens when bulldozers come in and they cut down all the trees for logging or develop a new shopping mall? Where we just defend our own tree, say, oh, it's okay if you cut all the other ones down. Please don't cut our tree down. Not that I think nonprofit leaders really think that way. So the moral boundaries of our mission statements are broader than our individual trees in the forest. If we reframe our mission statement, we claim that we have our individual trees, if you will, but we recognize we're part of this larger whole. And after all, it doesn't take anything away from our little tree to recognize that it's in the forest and work to preserve the whole thing. It's in everyone's best interest.
I love it. You just redefined climate change. We have to change the climate amongst ourselves, right, in order to save ourselves as nonprofits. So we've reached the 20-minute mark, and we're ready to accept calls. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. If you have any questions that you want to ask of Kate, please call in. Again, the number is 347-884-8121. And Kate, you can tell us how in the world we find time to save the world. Basically, that's what you're telling us.
Well, you know, Valerie, if I was an executive director today, listening to myself, I would be asking that very question, like, what does she think, that we don't have anything to do already? I'm not asking your listeners to get up tomorrow and do everything differently. We're talking about the way we think. And that's why I titled this Think Big. We need to stop and reframe everything that's going on around us and make sure we position ourselves in a position of power and exercising the power that's available to us, as opposed to assuming we're powerless and we're just tossed around on the waves this way and that. So hopefully these ideas will plant the seeds of a new way of thinking, just as a first step.
Oh, awesome. So we have a caller on the line, area code 312-675-0240. Will you please introduce yourself and ask Kate a question?
Hi, ladies, Valerie, Kate. This is Willie. And my question,
Hi, Willie.
Hi. I'm enjoying the conversation and was struck by your last comments on reframing mission. And I was wondering, is it basically, or is it akin to asking nonprofits to begin to consider more collaboration rather than working in isolation? You know, if you have a community and every other corner has a not-for-profit and they're each doing their own little thing in their own little world, are you, in reframing their mission, are you pushing them more to consider how can you collaborate more with someone who's have similar mission or whatever?
Thanks for that question, Willie. That gives me a chance to sneak in my fourth point here. I know we're very tight on time. Burying silos and developing alliances. That's my fourth point of the 5 next things. Now, you think about it, Willie, the image of a silo, I'm sure you've heard this, the silo is often used to refer to the way that nonprofits have traditionally functioned. Mm-hmm. My nonprofit's over here, yours is over there, and we want to make sure that we're not competing. We might be competing for the same grant funding, who knows. But in today's world, it's a totally different situation. Individuals that work in isolation of other nonprofits are very limited in how much impact that they can have. So collaboration and partnerships, that's the name of the game now. And there are many, many examples of that. If you go to the Council on Foundations website, I believe they have a database with several hundred examples of real-life partnerships and collaboration among nonprofits. By the way, we offer an entire class on that very topic here in our CNM program.
What was the site you said that had the database?
I believe it's the Foundation Center, and I'll make sure that gets on Valerie's blog with my other resources.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Are there any more questions, Willie, that you have for us?
Well, I was thinking that what she said about burying the silos and developing alliances took it back to innovation literacy, you know, just being creative when you're working not just with yourself but with others. I think it expands the opportunity that you can be more creative because you have to come up not just with new ideas but even new ways of working together and problem solving. So that in itself is innovation. That's just a thought that occurred to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Kate, did you want to respond?
Yes, absolutely. I want to slip in my fifth and final point because it follows from all of what we're talking about here, whether it's the reframing, the silos, and if we're going to change, if we're going to think big and then do something differently, then the absolute fifth thing that's got to be in the mix is cultivating inclusive leadership. And I really mean inclusive because that's something nonprofits need to do a lot more work on. The inclusive leader is the one that turns to everyone in the room, every tree in the forest, everyone riding the waves, and draws their voices into the conversation. So as we move forward to achieve a social vision of social justice, we tend to have the same old people in charge. Some of us, after all, are getting older and the need to retire. But that's not the reason. If we're talking about the whole moral ecosystem, social ecosystem, and let's have the voices of everyone around us as we work together for a better world.
You know, that is really key. You know, I live in a community that is just learning, I think, to collaborate better. And I would credit a lot of the work that Willie Cole has done, you know, when she was working with Spain Family Foundation, working in organizational development and leadership development, and pulling people together who wouldn't normally talk. So she's been doing a lot of that work, and I thank her for it. But I think we still can get better because I know one of the complaints that we still hear from people on the outside looking in is, you know, there are people who are making decisions. It's always the usual suspects. There are 2 North Lawndales. You know, it's always the same people, and they never let anybody else at the table. And we're trying our best to get better that. And I just thank you so much for sharing insights. With us.
It's all a process. It's a process. None of these things are going to happen overnight, right? But we start by thinking about them.
Okay, great. So we've come to the end of our show, and I'd like to thank Kate Pravera, Academic Director in UIC Certificate in Nonprofit Management Program, for being our guest. Kate, would you care to share any parting thoughts and tell us how we can reach you?
Certainly. I can be reached by email at the letter K Pravera, KPRAVERA, at uic.edu. And again, folks can learn more about this certificate program. Just Google UIC Certificate in Nonprofit Management. You'll find us very readily. If people would like to call in and talk with someone about the program, our phone number is 312-355-0423. That's 312-355-0423. And thank you so much, Valerie, for the opportunity to be on your show today. It's been great.
Oh, thank you. So thank you for listening to Nonprofit U Blog Radio Talk Show. The show will be available for download within about an hour. And be sure to tune in next week when our guest will be Kara Kennedy, the Executive Director of Lumity. She'll talk about how their programs and how nonprofit leaders can integrate technology into their programs and organizations. And I'm looking forward to a very lively discussion. So until then, I will see you next week.
Right now, save 50 to 70% off at Banana Republic factory stores and online. And 60% off absolutely everything at Gap factory stores. Save even more with 40% off clearance at Gap factory stores. And at Banana Republic factory, all flannel shirts $19.99 and doorbuster scarves $9.99. This weekend only. Search our store locator for your nearest Gap factory and Banana Republic factory store, or shop us online. Right now, save 50 to 70% off at Banana Republic factory stores and online. And 60% off absolutely everything at Gap factory stores. Save even more with 40% off clearance at Gap factory stores. And at Banana Republic factory, sweaters start at $19.99 and scarves start at $9.99. Hurry! Search our store locator for your nearest Gap factory and Banana Republic factory store, or shop us online.